Welcome to Salsido Paranormal. I'm your host, James Salsido, and tonight I'm continuing my review and reading of The Book of the Damned by Charles Fort. As always, you can find all episodes of the show, along with links to social media, ways to listen, and ways to support the show at the website, and that is salsidoparanormal.com. That's SALSIDO paranormal.com. There are many ways to support the show. You can share the show with others, rate and review it on your favorite podcast platform, and you can also sign up for the Patreon feed and get extra content there for as little as $1 a month. And you can also check out the merchandise store and get all kinds of shirts there and some other items with designs made by friends of the show. Please follow friends of the show. That would be Jen, the Arcane Observer, who has her own channel and is the co-host of the show on Saturdays with me whenever she's able to do so, to join me. Ricky from the Anything Is Possible podcast, and because I join him on Sundays for a paranormal themed show live stream, and Michael Strange of if I could talk, Troubled Minds Radio and the Troubled Minds Radio Network, KUAP Digital Broadcasting, where you can hear all kinds of amazing shows, as well as my own online 24/7 for free. So getting back to this reading here in review, a few things to keep in mind as we go along here. The words of Charles Fort, I messed that up. You and or I may not always agree with the words of Charles Fort and the thoughts there that I'm reading and sharing, and that is how that goes. So just be aware when I'm reading. Those are Fort's words, not mine. Also, there may be things in his writing that seemed mysterious when he wrote these books about 100 years ago that are not so mysterious now in terms of scientific discoveries and all that. And the last thing, as I always like to say, is I apologize in advance for any mispronunciations of words or of names of people or places because it is not always easy to figure out how to pronounce things, especially when they are not even in English. So, but with that, let me find my place again and get back to this book here. So he's been talking about observations of objects moving across the sun from the point of view of Earth, and seemingly massive objects too, not just tiny things. So getting back to that, once I find my spot again, I think, yeah, okay, right here. American Journal of Science, 2-28-246, 446. Report by Pastorff that he had seen twice in 1836 and once in 1837 two round spots of unequal size moving across the sun, changing position relatively to each other and taking a different course, if not orbit, each time. That in 1834 he had seen similar bodies pass 6 times across the disk of the sun, looking very much like Mercury in his transits. March 22nd, 1876. But to point out Leverrier's poverty-stricken average, or discovering planets upon a 50% basis, would be to point out the low percentage of realness in the quasi-myth stuff. That's quite the phrase there, of which the whole system is composed. I kind of like that, but I don't know how you'd ever use it. Port maybe be the only one that ever used it. Quasi myth stuff. Anyway, uh, we do not accuse the textbooks of omitting. Oops, I lost my spot. Of omitting fiasco, but we do note that theirs is the conventional adaptation here of all beguilers who are in difficulties. The diverting of attention. It wouldn't be possible in a real existence with real mentality to deal with, but I suppose it's good enough for the quasi intellects that stupefy themselves with textbooks. The trick here is to gloss over Leverrier's mistake and blame Lescarbot. He was only an amateur, had delusions. The reader's attention is led against Lescarbot by a report from M. Lias, director of the Brazilian Coast Survey, who at the time of Lescarbot's supposed observation had been watching the sun in Brazil, and instead of seeing even ordinary sunspots, had noted that the region of the supposed transit was of uniform intensity. But the meaninglessness of all utterances in quasi existence. And let me see here. Okay, in quotation marks, uniform intensity, in quotation marks, turns our way as much as against us. Or someday, some brain will conceive a way of beating Newton's third law if every reaction or resistance is or can be interpretable as stimulus instead of resistance. If this could be done in mechanics, there's a way open here for someone to own the world. Specifically in this matter, uh, uniform intensity means that Lescarbot saw no ordinary sunspot, just as much as it means that no spot at all was seen upon the sun. Continuing the interpretation of a resistance as an assistance, which can always be done with mental forces, making us wonder what applications could be made with steam and electric forces. We point out that invisibility in Brazil means parallax quite as truly as it means absence. And inasmuch as Vulcan was supposed to be distant from the sun, we interpret denial as corroboration. Method, of course, of every scientist, politician, theologian, high school debater. He cracks me up sometimes. Anyway, so the textbooks, with no especial cleverness, because no especial cleverness is needed, lead the reader into contempt for the amateur of Orgres and forgetfulness of Leverrier, and some other subject is taken up. But our own acceptance that these data are as good as ever they were, that if someone of eminence should predict an earthquake, and if there should be no earthquake at the predicted time, that would discredit the prophet. But data of past earthquakes would remain as good as ever they had. They had been. It is easy enough to smile at the illusion of a single amateur. The mass formation, Frisch, Stark, Decupus, Stuyvesant, Lescarbolt, Loomis, Gruthinson, DeVico, Scott, Ray, Russell, Hind, Lowe, Cambrai, uh, Weber, Standaker, Lichtenberg, Dangos, Hoffman, Schmidt, Loft, Steinhebel, Pastroff. These are all names of observers. These are only the observations conventionally listed relatively to an intramercurial planet. They are formidable enough to prevent our being diverted, as if it were all the dream of a lonely amateur, but they're a mere advance guard. From now on, other data of large celestial bodies, some dark and some reflecting light, will pass and keep on passing. So that some of us will remember a thing or two after the procession's over, possibly. Taking up only one of the listed observations, or our impression that the discrediting of Leverrier has nothing to do with the acceptability of these data. In the London Times, January 10th, 1860, is Benjamin Scott's account of his observation that in the summer of 1847 he had seen a body that had seemed to be the size of Venus crossing the sun. He says that, hardly believing the evidence of his sense of sight, he had looked for someone whose hopes or ambitions would not make him so subject to illusion. He had told his little son, aged 5 years, to look through the telescope. The child had exclaimed that he had seen a little balloon, in quotation marks, crossing the sun. Scott says that he had not had sufficient self-reliance to make public announcement of his remarkable observation at the time, but that in the evening of the same day he had told uh, Dr. Dick FRAS. I'm not sure why I don't know what those letters mean after, but who had cited other instances in the Times, January 12th, 1860, is published a letter from Richard Abbott, FR. Yeah, so I wonder if it's French. Not sure. FRAS, that he remembered Mr. Scott's letter to him upon this observation at the time of the occurrence. I suppose that at the beginning of this chapter, one had the notion that by hard scratching uh, through musty old records, we might rake up vague, more than doubtful data, distortable into what's called evidence of unrecognized worlds. Excuse me. Um, or constructions of planetary size. But the high authenticity and the support and the modernity of uh, of the accursed that we are now considering, and our acceptance that ours is a quasi existence in which, above all other things, hopes, ambitions, emotions, motivations, stands attempt to positivize, that we are here considering an attempt to systematize, that is sheer fanaticism in its disregard of the unsystemizable, that it represented the highest good in the 19th century, that it is uh, monomania, but let's see, yeah, okay, but heroic monomania that was quasi divine in the 19th century, but that this isn't the 19th century. As a doubly sponsored Brahmin in the regard of Baptists, the objects of July 29th, 1878 uh, stand out and proclaim themselves so that nothing but disregard of the intensity of monomania can account for their reception by the system, or the total eclipse of July 29th, 1878. And the reports by Professor Watson from Rawlins, Wyoming, and by Professor Swift from Denver, Colorado, that they had seen two shining objects at a considerable distance from the sun. It's quite in accord with our general expression, not that there is an intramercurial planet, but that there are different bodies, many vast things, near this earth, sometimes near the sun, sometimes orbitless worlds, which, because of scarcely any data of collisions, we think of as under navigable control, or dirigible superconstructions. Professor Watson and Professor Swift published their observations. Then the disregard that we cannot think of in terms of ordinary sane exclusions. The textbook systematists begin by telling us that the trouble with these observations is that they disagree widely. There is considerable respectfulness, especially for Professor Swift, but we are told that by coincidence these two astronomers, hundreds of miles apart, were eluded. Eluded? Yeah. Huh. ILLUDED. Their observations were so different. Professor Swift, Nature, September 19th, 1878, that his own observation was, in quotation marks, in close approximation to that given by Professor Watson, in quotation marks. In the observatory 2-161, Swift says that his observations and Watson's were confirmatory of each other. That's in quotation marks. The faithful try again. That Watson and Swift mistook stars for other bodies. Okay. Excuse me. In the observatory 2-193, Professor Watson says that he had previously committed to memory uh, all stars near the sun, down to the seventh magnitude, and he's damned anyway. How such exclusions work out is shown by Lockyer, Nature, August 20th, 1878. He says, in quotation marks, there is little doubt that an intramercurial planet has been discovered by Professor Watson. That was before excommunication was pronounced. He says, in quotation marks, if it will fit one of Leverrier's orbits, uh, um, close quotation marks, it didn't fit. In Nature 21-301, Professor Swift says, in quotation marks, I have never made a more valid observation, nor one more free from doubt, close quotation marks. He's damned anyway. Okay. We shall have some data that will not live up to most rigorous requirements, but if anyone would like to read how carefully and minutely these two sets of observations were made, see Professor Swift's detailed description in the American Journal of Science 116-313 and the technicalities of Professor Watson's observations in Monthly Notices 38-525. Let's see. I think I'll stop there because they have less than 2 minutes left here. So yeah, let's talk about more of these observations, more of these objects. It makes me wonder now, are there people still seeing things out there, but they're just not, because of all the stigma against anything anomalous, they're just not being reported, or at least not to the public. They're sort of being kept within certain groups of people out there. Just a side thought there. But yeah, we'll continue this another time, and eventually we'll get to this book. It's been a lot of fun so far. I'm not bored with it at all. Hope you all enjoy it. Please also, like I always say, check out all the links in the description. And for all the friends of the show, they've helped out so much, and I really appreciate everything that they do and everything the listeners do as well. And please check out again the Trouble Minds Radio Network, KUAP Digital Broadcasting, for all kinds of other amazing shows as well, as I always say at the beginning of the show. And so, yeah, looking forward to doing this again. Um, and of course, we'll still continue with the Haunted Places in the U.S. series as well. I like to alternate each week between the Fort episodes and the Haunted Places episodes, just so you all get some different options as to what you want to listen to. Uh, and let me know what you all think through social media or through Discord. And I will talk to you all next time on Salsido Paranormal. Take care.